But when you're taking a reesterified triglyceride omega that is high quality, you will see results. So we're not fixing something immediately, but it didn't break immediately either. So we have to give our bodies a chance to really start absorbing that and putting it where it needs to go. So I would say within about 3 months, they're going to start noticing some improvement. But the longer you take it, the more and more you will continue to improve. Because this is found in all areas of our body as well. It's not just dry eye.
Hello and welcome to the Crystal Podcast on iCode Media. Today, Dr. Aaron Warner and I, we discuss omega-3s in dry eye as well as other things. Really, we had a great guest. And really, I think from my perspective, most doctors misunderstand or we underestimate the real benefits of high-quality omega-3s, which ultimately leads to this ineffective treatment by our patients. And so we wanted to have Brittany Taylor in to talk about that. And she kind of discusses some of these common misconceptions. She talks about how reesterified triglyceride omega-3s give us tangible and lasting results in dry eye, neurological, cardiovascular health. And so she kind of shares concrete framework for setting realistic expectations and then measuring success with objective signs and symptoms questionnaires and tests to evaluate and establish these follow-up protocols so that you can ensure that your patients are getting what they think they're getting. And they're having the effect that you think they're getting. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. The most common questions I get include, what ophthalmological codes or evaluation and management codes should I use? What ICD-10 codes do I need to bill with this CPT code? What CPT codes can be billed together and what can't? And my favorite, how do I manage a patient who has diabetes who comes in for a quote-unquote routine eye exam? These questions really highlight the confusion and uncertainty that serves as a daunting hurdle for providers, makes it more challenging for them to care for their patients and provide those patients with the best opportunity for a lifetime of ocular health and clear vision. That's why we built iCode Education for this specific purpose. Our mission is to provide optometrists with resources to help you understand disease states, revenue cycles, and billing and coding so that you can put that on autopilot and truly care for your patients. Check out iCodeEducation.com. That's EYECODE education.com. We've developed a premier billing and coding bundle that includes all of our billing and coding resources in one place. We also have a 10% discount code just for listeners of this podcast. Enter the coupon code EYECODEMEDIA22 at checkout. We'd love to work with you. Check out iCodeEducation.com. Nutrition is one of the toughest conversations in eye care because it's invisible. The Life Meter gives doctors a non-invasive way to measure carotenoid status and actually show patients a number. And many doctors use it chairside to personalize recommendations for macular health and overall wellness. And when patients see their score, the conversation becomes easier and compliance goes way up. Check it out for yourself, the Life Meter. So Brittany Taylor, we did a little bit of an introduction on kind of where we're going for this year and what we want to do with these episodes. But we brought you in kind of because you're sort of expert in the realm of understanding the differences and nuances of triglycerides and really the kind of overarching omega-3. And you also kind of are there talking to doctors who misunderstand information or maybe confused about something. So tell me about some of the confusion that you might encounter when you're speaking to doctors about omega-3s.
Yeah. So, well, the first thing is only a fool thinks he's a wise man. So I would never say that I'm an expert in anything. There's always room for improvement and a lot to learn. But I think one of the biggest things is there's so much misinformation. Doctors hear, oh, it doesn't really work. Why should my patients use it? Or they're getting feedback from patients that what they've tried in the past isn't working, when in reality, they're taking an inferior product, so they wouldn't feel that it's working and they wouldn't see results. So I think it's not so much about the misinformation. I think there's just a lot of, or the confusion. I just think there's been a lot of people that have been discouraged from the results that they've expected when they've tried inferior products.
Well, then when you think about, kind of the right expectation. So if I were going to give a patient and say, listen, I know you've been on an omega-3 before, but there's lots of different options. And I know they can be, it can be confusing when you go to the store, but I want you to try this omega-3 specifically. We might say TG3 omegas.
Okay.
What would I tell them in terms of their expectation before we would know
So
if that was going to have the same effect or a better effect?
yeah, so I kind of like to under promise and over deliver. I think that's the safest way with patients. So I like to refer to our bodies as a reservoir. So depending on where you are, where your reservoir is, you could start noticing benefits in 3 months. If you're very depleted, it's going to take a little bit longer. Or if you have other systemic issues, then we may see it take even a little bit longer. But when you're taking a reesterified triglyceride omega that is high quality, you will see results. So it's we're not fixing something immediately, but it didn't break immediately either. So we have to give our bodies a chance to really start absorbing that and putting it where it needs to go. So I would say within about 3 months, they're going to start noticing some improvement. But the longer you take it, the more and more you will continue to improve, because this is found
You
in
know,
all areas of our body as well. It's not just dry eye.
you know, one of the things, so I do want to talk about dry. So again, I think when we have to start with kind of the ocular stuff and then expand deeper or beyond that. But most doctors, if they're going to start using a omega-3, is likely going to be with dry eye.
Yep.
And so what I think, Aaron and Brittany as well, I'd like to get your reaction, but my intuit, the way I would intuit this would be to say, okay, well, if I'm going to expect 3 months and I'm going to start a patient on, an omega-3, let's say TG3, I wanted to know a number of things to see if it's quote unquote working. The first one would be I wouldn't rely just on what the patient tells me. The main reason I would do that is, and you pointed this out, Brittany, was that people aren't going to get, they're not going to, like, they don't fall off a cliff. And most patients with dry eye don't, all of a sudden they're doing fine and they go from a speed of 0 to a speed of 15. If they did, they would be banging on our doors saying, please fix me. Right. So it didn't go that way. So we shouldn't expect that any one of our treatments are going to make them, you start taking this today and it's going to get way better tomorrow. So I think the most important part is set some baseline information that's both subjective and objective, and you can remeasure that. So one would be, I think what's really important is have some sort of standardized symptom questionnaire, whether that's DEQ or what's the one from DEWS 3, Aaron? Is it dry eye 6 or dry 6, DEI 6,
Something.
I can't remember, or speed, and then start that as your baseline. That's your symptom questionnaire. And then look at all of your signs, your ocular signs of dry eye. So are you looking at tear meniscus height? Are you looking at corneal staining, redness of the conjunctiva? Are you looking at the meibomian glands? Like, have a very specific set of things that you're looking at. And then what you're saying, Brittany, is intentionally follow up with that patient, because I would expect some improvement in 3 months. Now, maybe in a patient who has diabetes and who's depleted, et cetera, I might see that more in 6 months, in 9 months, but I can sort of touch base in 3 to see, okay, well, how does your speed score? How does your symptom score improving? Because a lot of times what I've found, Brittany, is if I'm just relying on the patient to tell me without any other kind of standardized subjective metrics or objective measurements, because they get better so slowly, they can't tell you whether or not they're doing better, really, with any certainty after 3 months of duration.
Right.
What do you think about that?
No, I think that's a wonderful protocol to have. If we're not starting at base, then we have no way to measure our outcomes. So our patients need to understand too that this is a process, like you were just saying. You're not jumping off a cliff with dry eye. It didn't just happen overnight. So I think that there needs to be an expectation set, and there needs to be there needs to be a protocol within the practice. And I know some of the techs will hear that and they're like, oh, great, more work. We have to reach out. But as we've
No, no.
learned,
When I say I say you have the patient back, I don't think you should reach out. I think you should have that patient intentionally back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this is something that we put on our texts. Maybe that is what happens. That's interesting. You brought that up. Actually, this is not one of the. Why did you say that? Why would you say text? Is that what a lot of doctors are doing?
I just for
Like in terms of
follow up,
reaching back out?
yeah, or front desk, like, hey, I need you to follow
Mm.
up with this patient. We need to ask some questions, and so I think that it sometimes one of the hurdles is staff engagement with the products. So like as a doctor,
Mhm.
you guys can be super excited about bringing something in, and that's on us as reps too. Like we need to make sure that everyone is actively engaged and involved throughout the process, just like you want your patient to be. But I think that
Yep.
can be
No,
where,
100.
oh, sorry.
No, I agree 100%. I think that what I'm hearing and what at least this is what is making me think is there's a lack of a set protocol, a lack of a set system within the practice to follow up after the initial diagnosis and treatment recommendation. So when we see a patient with dry eye, we're going to start them on omegas, TG omega-3. We're probably going to start them on some other things as well. But
Like a
if we
bruiser
have it
mask or something.
planned what to do, yeah, brooder mask, heat masks, the peak foam cleansers, maybe even talk about some thermal expressions or tears. We can go down the rabbit hole. But if there's not a set, here's how we're going to follow up, because you've got signs and symptoms, and there's things I see that the patient doesn't feel. There's things the patients feel that may not match what we're exactly seeing, and so you need both aspects to be together. But when it's hey, I'll follow back up with you in a couple of weeks, that's pretty vague. And if we don't have a set system within the office from the doctor to the staff to convey to the patients, I think that's where we lose a lot of the flow and the follow through. And what I tell patients is however long it took us to get to this point, it's going to take us almost the same amount of time, hopefully not as long, but it's going to take us a long time to get there. So if you've had dry eye for years, you've had these problems for years, you've been eating McDonald's 3 times a day for years, we're
Yeah.
not going to fix this overnight. It's a process that we're going to go back, and so we're on this journey together.
Yeah, I think, Brittany, also what's very interesting, I can't get over my own cognitive biases, but like I will kind of leave that point because I think I've unpacked it on the podcast a number of times, and I will probably unpack it again. But your observation of where practices battle is probably a key distinction, I think, of where if your observation of it's put on other people outside of the doctor to follow up with that patient, that is not the right place, in my opinion, to follow up. And that's where a lot of practices where I see failure in other areas. And when I say failure, they're identifying it as a failure coming to me, telling me about it. It's
Right.
that they're failing in other things the same way without intentional follow-up. So, but you also mentioned, I want to kind of leave that for a second. Because otherwise we're going to spend 45 minutes talking about it.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the difference between, kind of reesterified triglycerides and ethyl ester. We didn't say ethyl ester, but that's kind of the implication that you made. Talk about the differences there and why you think what the evidence is that surrounds the reesterified triglycerides as being important in terms of delivering a clinical benefit.
So I like to keep things simple and I love analogies. So sorry if I keep going back to that. But I use a ladder
I love it. Go ahead.
as my analogy. So the EPA and DHA are 2 sides of a ladder, and the triglycerides are what hold that ladder together. So those are the rungs of the ladder. When all omegas go through an esterification process, because we treat our ocean like a giant garbage can, so we have to make sure that we're not ingesting any of that, the bisphenols, the mercuries, the other toxins. So they go through this esterification process. Essentially, that strips the rungs from the ladder. So you have EPA and DHA, just 2 sticks wobbling around. Good companies, such as MacuHealth with our TG, the greatest omega, go back in and they reintroduce, which is reesterified, that triglyceride background. So you have a ladder that's a usable tool. That's the RTG form. The ethyl ester form leaves that ethanol in there, which is it. 2 sticks are not a tool. You cannot climb a tool, so they don't work. So that's my simple explanation for it. you need to climb a ladder. You need to have a usable tool, and that's what reesterified triglyceride omegas are. Methyl ester omegas are very molecularly unstable, so they go rancid very quickly, which is why a lot of people have that. You open it and it already smells like a bad fish smell,
Yep.
unless they've covered it with other scents and chemicals. And then they also get that return, which is not pleasant. You don't want to be burping up fish. But another way I kind of relate it to people too is omegas are going to have a slight fish smell, but there's a difference between walking into a seafood restaurant and knowing that you should not eat there. And then there's a difference between walking into a seafood restaurant and it smells briny and it smells good. Like that's the difference between an ethyl ester omega and a triglyceride omega.
Is there, as far as like, in the dream, I can't remember. So I can't remember, the dream study got a lot of criticism. Well, omega-3s got a lot of criticism after the dream study. Do you find that, like, when you're out in the field talking to doctors, that there's still this kind of perception that the dream study, that omega-3s aren't any better than, say, olive oil?
No, I don't. I think that you need to look
don't? That's good.
Yeah, because I think doctors are smarter than that. You don't take one study and base everything that you're doing off of one single research paper. And there's so much other supporting evidence that shows that reesterified triglyceride omegas do make a difference. I think really, and using olive oil, they use 5,000 milligrams of olive oil. So I don't think that was a well done paper. I appreciate that they tried something, but if we look at the majority of papers that use reesterified triglyceride omegas, the results were fantastic. So I think it created a little bit of confusion, but I don't think that it was detrimental.
Yeah, I think so. I think first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, why do omega-3s work? Like, what's the underlying pathophysiology we're trying to fix? What's your sense? And Aaron and I can talk about this as clinicians as well, but Brittany, what's your sense of, like, what's the pathophysiology that we're trying to solve for? What are we trying to improve with an omega-3, like with TG3? Related to dry eye.
The biggest thing, and this is also with the carotenoids too, is inflammation is the root of the majority of issues that are happening in our body systemically. So we're trying to reduce that inflammation.
Can you pull up the dream study? Keep going. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm just interested because I wanted to cite correct information. Keep going.
So we're trying to reduce inflammation and help, my bone-making glands function properly. But the best thing about ours too is it's not just for the eyes. So the retina and the brain, DHA is primarily found in those more than EPA. So having high levels of DHA is going to help those systems as well. It's almost like WD-40. So better, your synapses are able to fire better and connect better with the proper lubrication.
So one of the things, so in my mind, I think you hit it on the head, right? And so Aaron and I will kind of discuss this as clinicians as well. And please interject, Brittany, if there's other thoughts you have as we're discussing it. But, in my mind, I think it's absolutely true. I think omega-3s have been pretty clearly implicated in reducing inflammation. I don't know that there's a lot of people that push back too much on that globally. And we can dig into other studies and kind of cite them as we need to. But when you look at the DREAM study, the primary outcome metric was improvement in symptoms. So improvement in symptoms of the OSDI score. And so when you think about that, you think, okay, if that's the main outcome that I'm looking at, but I don't distinguish between which patients have, let's say, inflammation at the beginning of the study and which patients don't have inflammation right at the end, we're not tracking the right thing, then that's where the study in my mind kind of falls a little bit short. Is like, I didn't do my homework before I started that patient to know whether or not this is likely going to have a big benefit. Now, I think you could also make the case that they help improve my bone-making gland function and those sorts of things, but again, did they even look at my bone-making gland function? Did they look at MGS scores? Did they look at secretion scores? So obviously, like, every study has limitations, but I think probably the biggest thing is, if I'm just waiting for patient symptoms, and I'm just scaling them on a severity of how symptomatic they are, I might even be so late in the game that oral anti-inflammatories like an omega-3 is not going to play a big enough role. I might need something more. So anyway, those would be kind of my general clinical thoughts on Dream.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, Omega, I
I
mean,
certainly
and
care
oil,
about.
sorry, and
Go ahead,
olive oil is
Brittany.
an omega-9 too. It wasn't even comparing omega-3s to omega-3s, which is another thing, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I was going to say too, I think that that any sort of reported subjective feedback from a patient, even on a an OSDI that we trust and use, there's still tons of variability from a patient's perspective, and no different than the pain scale, right? It's my wife will tell you that her pain scale is much different than mine, because life's ending when I have a cold, and she can
My wife will
tolerate a
say the
lot
same
more.
thing.
Yeah, and so and if I know I'm taking something that's going to help that, right, I might be psychologically, I might say, well, I'm taking something, so this should be better, so I'm going to take it better, or I'm being hypercritical. I don't feel a whole lot better, so now I'm going to undervalue. So I don't want to disvalue patient symptom feedback. I think that's incredibly important, but you have
Right.
to match it with
The
the signs
underlying
that you're seeing. You
pathophysiology.
have to
Yep.
look at both, and you have to match the two of them together. And I think if any study's missing one piece of that, I question, well, what am I missing? What's the bigger picture of this puzzle?
Yeah, and I think probably to kind of put my last point on this topic is that it is a function of kind of the problem in clinical care related to ocular surface disease in a comprehensive practice. I had a patient the other day that was referred to me from another really solid doc. And the patient was telling me how they got prescribed Restasis, and it was, hey, I saw a commercial on this, and the last doctor prescribed it. And then when I looked at the notes in the chart, there was never comments about re-prescribing the medication for years. And they were re-prescribing the medication. The same thing that the wife was in, and she was on Xiidra.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that she was on Xiidra is she thought it worked better than Restasis, and she saw it, and she asked the previous doctor, could they prescribe it? And so the previous doctor prescribed it. No kind of differential about whether this is meibomian gland dysfunction. And anyway, the point is, or whatever the other problem is, but I think the point is kind of taking the time to differentiate what the underlying problem is related to the ocular surface. Brittany, your partner, Aaron, does a fantastic job differentiating and distinguishing between which patients are going to be best, and that's with which treatments. And I think kind of the take home for me is, okay, well, if we're thinking about the DREAM study, well, DEWS 3 clearly, so actually within the Vision Source dry eye protocol, we did this years ago, was we really focused on pairing treatments with underlying disease state problems. Well, DEWS 3 has done that. And that's kind of, I think, the key of taking somebody who's frustrated with their treatments, right, with patient outcomes, and getting them not frustrated with patient outcomes. So I think, Brittany, when you're in the field, it's like if doctors are saying, listen, omega-3s don't work, well, are they really looking at you? I mean, I don't know how you do this, as this is for you. This is a problem you have to solve on your own, but I don't know how you convince the doctor to say, listen, did you really distinguish, maybe encouraging them to say, well, we find that patients with inflammation might do better here, or patients with meibomian gland dysfunction might do better here. So these are the doctors that do this really well, find that if they find telangiectasia or clogged meibomian glands or staining, those patients tend to do pretty well with omega-3s. But anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on that topic. And then I think, Brittany, what I wanted you to reflect on, because this is where I'm a little, well, I would say I am, but also kind of our listeners are a little bit less familiar with omega-3s, likely, is omega-3s in retinal health. So I've had a number of conversations with Jim Stringham related to this, and some of the kind of underlying metabolic diseases and microvascular diseases. So tell me a little bit about that from your perspective. Patients with presbyopia want freedom from readers, and the MyDay multifocal offers that with excellent comfort throughout the day. We use it in our practice because patients consistently report their vision feels natural at near, intermediate, and distance. And with a breathable daily disposable material, it supports ocular health as well. It's become a strong go-to option for our presbyopic patients, so I hope it's something that you can check out in your practice as well. MyDay multifocal. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed and start running a safer, more profitable practice, here's the next step. First, book a strategy call with us, Practice Performance Partners. We'll uncover the biggest risks and opportunities in your practice. Then choose the package that fits your goals. From there, we'll get you launched with confidence, with clear systems, with expert support, and with peace of mind knowing your practice is protected and set up to grow. Don't wait until something goes wrong. Book your strategy call with us, Practice Performance Partners, today.
Again, I mean, it all goes back to inflammation, I think, in so many different ways. So if you're looking at patients that have prediabetes, diabetic retinopathy, already diabetic, metabolic syndrome, and even more than that. So if you're looking further down the road at people that have Alzheimer's, dementia, they're pretty inflamed. There's a lot of inflammation. And so not only are you seeing it in the retina, but you're seeing this in the brain as well. And having these omegas where they're essential is going to reduce that inflammation. So it's not just, it's not a one-trick pony. You can also look at cardiovascular health. So having a high omega index reduces your risk. Having an omega index above 8% reduces your risk of having a fatal heart attack. So we like to pinpoint things and we like to say this works for this, but we really, I think, need to look at things in totality and as our bodies are a system. So if we treat it as such, we know that we're not just helping one thing, we're helping multiple ways.
No, I love that you said that. It always cracks me up when patients come in and we ask their medical history, what medications they're on, and the response is nothing for my eyes. And I have to remind them that when you take an Advil because your knee hurts, like there's not a little GPS in the Advil that gets to your knee.
You didn't know that?
It goes in your whole body. Right? I'm sure there's a conspiracy rabbit hole we can dive down to talk about it. But it's all related, and in general, healthy people are healthy.
Right.
And unhealthy people are not. And I've made a big blanket statement, and so don't get upset and come back. But but you've got but typically diseases don't operate in isolation, and there's lifestyle and there's dietary factors and there's all sorts of other factors involved. And the common thread that I see through a more unhealthy population is that increase in inflammation. Right, their world is everything they're doing in their world and their environment is adding to the inflammatory systems. Whereas as healthier individuals or people who tend to be healthier, their world is minimizing that inflammation.
Right.
And so I think that too often in optometry school and as doctors and as teams, we get hyper focused on solving a problem instead of taking two steps back and looking at all of the contributing factors around it, because the patient and even the treatments, right? For dry eye, I don't say, here, take your TG Omega-3 and you're done, right? That's part of the overall treatment complex that the treatment regimen we're going to propose, right? So how do each of these pieces play within each other? And if I'm going to, so I love your analogies, I'll throw one back. If I'm going to bake a cake, or I'm going to make some good tacos on the Blackstone, the outcome of the final taco is a direct result of the quality of the ingredients that go into it. So if I'm putting some bad ingredients into that taco, right? Maybe my guacamole came from
must be from San Diego.
Must be from San Diego. Got good guacamole, right? As long as you're not putting corn in my tacos. But if I could have the best meat, but if I put in some bad guacamole, it diminishes it. If I put in some salsa that came out of a jar, it's going to diminish the quality of the final taco product, which is what we really ultimately care about. And so I think the quality of the TG Omega, the quality of the drops you put in, the supplementation, the quality of their lifestyle, because you're not going to Omega-3 your way out of the Diet Cokes in McDonald's. Right, so this all kind of comes together, but it's all.
Can I not do that, Brittany?
No,
Tell me I can.
Unfortunately, people have unrealistic expectations of a pill and of a supplement. Like this is not a fix-it pill. This isn't like you. So I joke about this too. When we talk about carotenoids, I'm like, you can't tell them that this is going to help with their macular degeneration. Because then they're going to be like, great, I don't have to modify anything. I can eat McDonald's. I'll smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. This little pill is going to fix everything that I do the other 23 hours of the day. it's unrealistic. And so much of it has to come, there has to be some, the patient has to take some responsibility for making these changes. Another analogy, you can't go to the gym and get abs in 2 weeks. You know, you have to work at it, and you have to work at it for a long time. But you also don't get to get abs and then you never have to work out again. Like, that would be wonderful, but that's not the case. So
Yeah.
I just
So Brittany, let me ask you, kind of when you think about let's say a doctor has kind of embraced an omega-3 mindset and using these products for their patients. What's the most common thing? I kind of give you the last word here is, what's the most common thing that you see they still struggle with? Like, listen, they believe in it. They want their patients to have it. They want to offer it to patients, but they're still struggling and they want your help. What are they coming to you with?
I don't want to be a salesperson is probably the biggest thing that they say. I don't want my patients.
How do they overcome it?
You're not, this is, sorry, I'll calm down because I get a little frustrated.
I think this is because you interact with practices all day long, and so this is just helpful for us to kind of wrap our minds around, because these are the sorts of things that we have to work through internally, Aaron and I, and because you're not wrong in that. You're not wrong in that thinking, even when we are trying to bring it to the front of our brains and protect ourselves against it. Because actually, Aaron and I were talking about both of those things before you came on. So how do you help them overcome that?
You're not selling anything. You're providing the patient the best quality of care. So if you're really doing them a disservice if you send them to a CVS or a Walgreens or I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on, but if you send them to a box,
say whatever you want. Yeah.
If you look at the number of supplements and the number of omegas that they're going to have to choose from, that's not really fair to your patient. First of all, they're getting poor quality. They don't know if they're actually getting any active ingredients within that bottle because they're not regulated. So first of all, you're making your patient take a second trip, or they're going to get it online, and who knows where it comes from online. So you're providing a service. You're uncovering that they have dry eyes. They're telling you they have dry eyes. You're doing all this additional testing. And then you're not going to give them a result. You're not going to give them an actionable item. You're not going to give them something that will help take care of the complaint that they brought into you that day. So it's really switching your mindset to, I'm providing what the patient needs versus I'm selling it to them. That's the biggest thing.
That's exactly what we were talking about.
Yeah, you have to provide a solution. If they have a problem, you need to provide a solution, and that's what this does, and it's the safest and best product for your patient.
Well, I find it interesting because we do that very well with eyewear.
Yes.
You come in, you have a problem, I provide the solution. We do that very well with contact lenses, right? And so I struggle to understand why that same mentality doesn't transition over. And the only thing I can come up with, and I'm really excited about you joining us on this conversation, is because there's just not quite the same confidence level, if we're being honest, with supplements, with omegas, as there is with eyewear and contact lenses. And maybe it has to do with the amount of time we spend in our schooling doing it. Maybe it has to do with a little bit of less personal experience, right? That N of one with the doctor or the team, where I haven't taken it, so I don't know. I can't say with certainty that it makes a difference, but I have put on contacts and I have put on glasses, and and I can see the immediate effect. So it could be that aspect of it. But I think that again, if I'm being honest, I don't want to be like a salesman, is kind of a cop out that we tell ourselves, and to put up a barrier to protect our own egos, because if we do believe that it's important, and the data says that it is, there's zero reason why we shouldn't be helping our patients have access to the best products and the best opportunities. They still have a choice. It's not forced by any means, but we're doing a disservice if we don't make those available to them.
And I think I think you hit the nail on the head with that one too. So obviously there's not, during schooling, there's I think like 1 hour class on this or something on nutrition, and it's antiquated. Um, but I think the biggest thing is, well, what if the patient asks a question that I don't know the answer to? And then they're coming to you as an expert. And so that can be really scary, but that shouldn't hold you back from learning. There's so many experts that are available that are happy to share the information, and your patients are going to get it one way or the other. The supplement company is growing exponentially. People are taking a little bit more proactive approach to their lifestyle and to their health in recent years. So your patients are going to get it one way or the other. I feel like it behooves doctors to take a little bit of that responsibility and make sure that that they're providing their patients with something that is quality versus something that Joe Schmo made in his garage and has no active ingredients.
So, Brittany, thanks so much for coming on. You've actually opened up 3 or 4 different kind of ideas that I think we probably will address on future episodes, because I think Aaron, what Brittany has kind of unlocked in my mind is there's a couple things that I think as we do this more over 2026 is, we got to dive into probably you mentioned counterfeits, so we probably ought to dive into some counterfeits. She brought up carotenoids in terms of inflammation, so we should probably dive into that. Brittany, I'm not going to ask you to stick around to do more of that, so we'll hold that for later. But thanks so much for being on.
Yes.
I think it was really helpful and insightful. Thank you.
No, thank you both so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.